Robert Klein sat in his office on the 87th floor of a glass skyscraper in downtown New York. His empire, hotels, hedge funds, technology companies, was generating billions. Everything seemed perfect: the silence of the air conditioner, the slight creak of an expensive leather chair, the wedding ring on his finger, which he almost never wore, but today he remembered. The phone rang. The lawyer's voice was as cold as ice. "Robert, we have a problem. The prosecutor's office is preparing a case. Tax returns. The audit showed discrepancies." Klein froze for a moment. His face, always calm and confident, lost its expression. "I pay an army of accountants to make sure there are no problems. Do you understand what you're saying? This is not a trifle. They believe that hidden funds are flowing through offshore accounts. And there is a witness." Witness. The word was a blow to the chest. Robert felt the ground shake beneath him. Only one of his closest friends could have witnessed it. That evening he entered his villa in Greenwich. His wife, Amanda, did not look at him. She only whispered, "Did you think secrets remain dead? I will not remain silent any longer." He caught his breath. "Is that you?" She looked away into the darkness. At that moment Robert realized, his empire was cracking not from the outside, but from the inside. The curtain falls at the moment of betrayal, and his heart is gripped by cold horror. The following days became hell. The newspapers tore his name to pieces. Klein's empire is built on lies. Former partners refused to cooperate. The senators he financed called him a threat to the economy. He convened a board of directors. "They won't prove anything." His voice was low, but his eyes were burning. "We'll go all the way." But even in the room of millionaires, he could see the betrayal. One of them, Martin, stood up and said coldly, "We're not going with you. We're going against you." Within weeks, Robert had lost half his assets. Banks were freezing his accounts. His picture was on the front page of the New York Times next to the headline, "Hero or Criminal?" At night, he sat alone in his dark office, whispering to himself, "I built this from scratch. I didn't steal, I just bent the rules. Is there a difference?" One morning, he got a call. A hoarse voice on the receiver said, "We know your wife is cooperating with the prosecutors. If you sign the deal, you won't go to jail. But you'll lose everything." He dropped the receiver and smashed the glass against the wall. The blood from his cut hand mixed with the expensive wine. It was a moment of breaking. He realized that his reputation was lost, his family was lost, his empire was on the verge of collapse. The act ended with a scream in the empty living room, echoing like the scream of a man who had lost himself. In his darkest hour, a man he hadn't expected appeared. An old friend from his youth, Jacob, who had once left his business, unable to stand the shadowy schemes. "You know why I left then," Jacob said, sitting across from him in a cheap coffee shop on the outskirts. "But I still remember that guy who wanted to change the world, not buy it." Robert was silent. His eyes were empty. "They think you're a monster. But you have a chance. I found the documents. It's all a conspiracy. Someone planted evidence. It was Martin's work." Robert's hands trembled. He flipped through the folders. There were transactions, fake signatures, fake accounts. "So, I'm not entirely guilty," his voice trembled. "You're guilty of letting this happen. But not of what you're accused of. And if you're ready to fight, I'm with you." For the first time in months, Robert felt a breath of hope. He was walking in the dark, and suddenly a light flashed in front of him. At the end of the act, he clutched the documents like the key to salvation. His eyes burned with new determination. The courtroom had become a theater. Everyone was in the room: the media, his enemies, his former allies, Amanda, who sat in the front row and never took her eyes off him. The prosecutor shouted, Robert Klein is a symbol of greed, corruption, and lies. He made a living off the blood of small businesses. But Robert stood up for himself for the first time in a long time. Yes, I made mistakes, his voice was deep. I let others write the rules because I thought it was a game. But if I'm guilty of trusting, then let that be my sentence. He threw the papers on the table. But the truth is here. It's not me, it's them. And I'm willing to pay for my sins, but not theirs. The room froze. Amanda covered her face with her hands. Martin turned pale. The press exploded with headlines. It was all or nothing. And Robert decided to play to the end. The verdict was unexpected. He had avoided prison, but he had lost almost everything. His empire had collapsed. All he had left was a house by the sea and silence. He sat on the terrace, listening to the waves. Jacob said next to him, "You could get up again. You still have connections." But Robert shook his head. "My greatest empire was not made of concrete and money. It was made of lies. I don't want to build castles in the sand anymore." Amanda arrived a few months later. They were silent for a long time. "I betrayed you because I didn't recognize the man I loved," she said. "Maybe he's back now." Robert smiled for the first time in a long time. Maybe. He looked at the horizon and thought, is it possible to be rich and honest? Is truth always worth more than success? The waves crashed against the rocks, as if answering, the truth always remains, even if everything else disappears. The ending is open, but there is light in it. A man who had lost everything had finally found himself. 6 months had passed. Robert lived quietly, studying books, making his own coffee, watching the sunrises. It seemed that the storm had passed. But one evening, as he sat on the shore, a stranger in an expensive coat approached him. "Mr. Klein," his voice was cold, "do you think the story is over? You stole money not only from your partners. You forgot about those who financed you from the shadows." Robert shuddered. "I'm not in business anymore. It doesn't matter. You owe us. And we'll come for you." He sat awake for a long time at night, listening to the rain beating on the glass. The past wouldn't let go. Everything he thought was closed was rising again. Now his enemies weren't politicians or partners. Now it was an organization that stood above the law. The final act was the feeling that peace was just an illusion, and the shadow was reaching out again. Suddenly he was offered a deal. His former friends from the shadow circle said, "We know you've lost everything. But you can come back. We'll give you capital. There's a new scheme, a new market. Come with us, and you'll be emperor again." Robert stood at a crossroads. Jacob's voice sounded in his head. "You've already sold your soul once. Are you ready to do it again?" Amanda, who was returning to his life, looked him straight in the eye. "If you go there, I'll go forever. I can't stand living a lie anymore." He felt his heart break. Money gave him power, a voice in society, greatness. But for the first time in his life, he realized that true greatness was the ability to refuse. The tension of the act, he clenches the contract in his hands and then tears it to pieces. His choice is freedom, even if it means poverty. He didn't go back to the empire. Instead, he started something else, a foundation for children in poor neighborhoods. People laughed, Klein is playing philanthropist to clean up his act. But he didn't make excuses. He just did it. One evening he was sitting in an old school classroom where the children were reading books he had bought with his money. A boy came up to him and asked, "Mr. Klein, were you ever rich?" Robert smiled. "Wealth is not what you have in the bank. It's what you leave behind." The boy nodded, and Robert felt true peace for the first time in a long time. His name was no longer associated with empires and skyscrapers. Now it meant something else. He sat on the ocean shore and thought, I have lost a kingdom, but I have found a soul. And perhaps this is the greatest wealth that one can have. The finale is not a triumph or a catastrophe, but a quiet truth: a person who has walked through the darkness has left a light for others.